story you are about to see is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent.
Okay.
Okay.
You're still on.
Okay, I'm still on. Welcome to WWDBTV's awesome show, Wtf Us, where we talk about current issues in our country and debate about what to do if there's anything to do about them. Joining us today, we have some extra special guests. Claire is here, the daughter of Dirk, and she is an awesome trauma-informed yoga teacher, among other amazing things, and is going to help us wrap our heads around what we can maybe do to approach our circumstances in a way where we're not just constantly freaking out. My dad, Kurt, is here for the second week in a row because I'm home visiting my folks, and he has a cool perspective to share, so he's joining us. And we have Ariel in Santa Cruz, and Tali in Colorado, and Dirk. Sorry, we have Dirk already. And
don't give away my location.
Yeah, and John. Well, I think our locations are kind of cool because we're all over the country at this point. We're in Pennsylvania. John is in Vegas. And so we have kind of like a broad assortment of Americans from different backgrounds, states, and affiliations too. So it's kind of cool.
The room that Tally's in, though, it always looks like she's in witness protection.
I am. That's why I said don't give away my location.
Oh shit! I'm sorry, I did it again. You're just in a sauna, in an undisclosed sauna somewhere.
Yeah.
It looks like you're in a sauna. Yeah.
Dirk, it looks like we live together.
Yeah, because of the backgrounds.
I gotta know, like, what's on the Post-its?
Oh, good night. This is me getting organized. It's all empty. Except for this one is from my son. It says, "My mom is beautiful," so that one will always stay.
Oh.
Aw, that's so true. What a nice son.
He's amazing. I'll keep him.
So speaking of being all over the United States, we might have a guest to pop in who is not in the United States, but she has been on the show before. My daughter Layla is presently in her bomb shelter. She's in Israel, and the area that she's in is being bombed right now.
Wow,
So,
when did that happen?
To be clear, I was cheering for Layla, not for the bombing.
They started they started yesterday for us, or I don't know, I'm losing track now. But right now they are, well, I guess they started Thursday for them. I don't know. Anyway,
Wow.
they're bombing right now, and
she's in the Middle East.
she's in Israel.
Right.
And so right now they've got the door closed, and so she can't be on Zoom with the door closed. It doesn't work. So if they get to a point where the door can open, then she'll join us, pop in, and let us know what's going on.
You sent her the link?
I'll send her the link right now.
Okay. All right, cool.
Man, is this just like a normal bombing, or is this like a special bombing?
This is
What world do we live in that we ask that?
This is a war right now, and the name of the war is kind of funny. If you want to laugh at war, the name of the war is Breaking Dawn, which
Sorry.
which just shows us how young those in the Israeli military are. So
it's a war against who?
It's they're being bombed from the West Bank right now, or from Gaza. So the Israelis bombed. What's that?
Gaza.
And managed to get like a big jihadist. And so now they're bombing back, but Israel just took out 3 mortar launchers. So that's good. Yeah, I don't know.
Does this have anything to do with the terrorists that the U.S. just
No,
Well-
Israel just took out a
Another one?
different one.
Okay.
But we aren't
Palestinian, right?
Yes, he was a leader of Hamas.
Yeah,
Need a
and
little bit of context. What is Layla doing there?
Layla lives out there. She just finished her army service about a year ago.
Okay, thank you.
So it's nice that she's not serving right now, because the last war she was serving, and that was
Very
scarier.
Yeah.
But yeah, Israel won't be getting the pats on the back that the US got. So it is still pretty scary. But hopefully she'll get a chance to pop in and fill everybody in better than we can.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of a good place for us to start our show, because I just really don't see that conflict ending anytime soon within the next couple of decades. It's just like this is a constant back and forth over and over again. It just, because most people don't really even understand the conflict or the I should say the series of conflicts that go on there and the shifting alliances.
Well, the Christians among them who are familiar with this whole thing believe that the Armageddon, the end of the world, will occur in the Middle East. And they keep pointing to the fact that one of the reasons, and I think it's ridiculous personally, but that they want to keep Iran from developing nuclear weapons is that they won't hesitate.
It's the underdogs.
They won't hesitate to use them on the Israelis. And of course, the Israelis have nuclear weapons, although they haven't told anybody that they do. But they're not stupid, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
And I seriously think if there's going to be an Armageddon, that's what the Christians say, that it's going to happen in the Middle East, is where it's going to start. And
in order for Jesus to come back.
In order for Jesus to come back, we have to destroy ourselves so he can come in and wave his magic wand on everybody and make it all better.
Yeah, I could just see him up in heaven, just waiting. Say, yeah, man, I get to come back to earth as soon as they just destroy each other. Woo!
Right. Well, I mean, speaking of Armageddon, our topic this week
Exactly.
is about whether or not we're going to make it as a species on this planet into the future, and kind of what are our biggest obstacles as well as our biggest potential hopes, and you know what we all think about like the future of humanity. And
one of the things that came up for me as you were speaking, Rachel, is this idea that the earth is going to take care of itself. And so no matter how crazy we get and going against each other, you know, it's whether or not we will survive as a species is kind of irrelevant, because the earth is going to survive as an earth. And so it's like, if we don't start taking care of each other and the earth and like this place that we live in, we're gone, and the earth will start over. We've seen that before, you know.
I mean, the earth will survive as the earth for a while, but then eventually the sun will swell up and roast all life on it.
I mean, which comes
So
first, right?
Yeah, but that's going to be a while.
yeah, I think part of the earth will always be the earth in some way or another, you know, aside from, the heat death, but the greenhouse gas effect and potential, like the excessive warming of the earth to a point where it won't be able to continue its cycle of ice ages to kind of readjust the balance, and the amount of other species that are human species have killed at this point. I think it's over 1 million species of other plants and animals that we have specifically wiped off this planet because of our polluting and destruction of environment. And so, I mean, I'm not so worried about, humanity. I'm like, whatever, we might not make it, but it is sad that it's sort of like become sort of our dominion to just destroy this place for everything else too.
Right.
I think it's about a species a minute that's going extinct. I think it's about a species a minute at this point that's going extinct. I think we are technically in we're currently in one of the mass extinctions of Earth's history. And we're the cause of it.
It begs the question, why though? Why are we so destructive and power hungry
Funny you should mention that, because I was just literally getting ready to say what I believe, that I think the problem is that all over the world, the majority of people worship money, greed. It's not religion, it's money. We have been able to convince ourselves over the centuries of man being on this planet that having material possessions is more important than anything else. And it has literally tainted everything that we do, including religion. Even religion is getting to that point to where it's like that. So the reason I'm bringing that up is because if you look at the reason for almost every war, every bit of pollution, all these other things, every lack of cooperation, it all has to do with greed. It all has to do with money.
I'm going to agree and disagree. So I agree with this power hungry, money, material thing, but I don't agree that it's the majority of the world. I actually think it's a very small minority that is so power hungry, that wants it so badly that they are using fear tactics and trauma. So if we're talking about this like idea of like why we're being re-traumatized all the time, they're using trauma and fear and this like weakness within us to want to connect and saying like, well, if this and this happens, you are going to lose your people, you're going to lose your sense of support. And I think it's that's a big problem, where we have a power over structure instead of being, you know, parallel or horizontal structure, if you will. And it's literally a small majority killing us as a people.
I guess I probably should have worded that better. I think it's more they have made it normalized, you know.
I mean, I see what you guys are both saying in terms of, it's kind of interesting. I often feel like the whole, yeah, we lump ourselves together as like all of humanity, all of this. And it really, throughout time, I really do feel like there's been sort of like the elite, non-empathic psychopaths of the world throughout history that have had that desire for power and dominion over other people and things, and have pushed it to the max without any connection to the consequences. Because I don't think that normal humans can really, I think because of our natural empathy that most of us have, like we couldn't, you know, we're harmed when we harm others. It hurts to hurt someone. And I think most people do feel that and don't want to hurt each other. And so that there are people out there that don't feel that are willing to exploit those of us that do. I think it's been the cause of all this imbalance from the beginning. And I don't want to really be associated with them, because I'm not like that. And I don't think most people are.
I mean, there are sociopaths in this world, but I don't think it's necessarily as simple as you're just like born one kind of person or another. I mean, I think generally human behavior has some basis in logic. So, I mean, for the people, like greed is often a response to a sense of scarcity.
Right.
So, you know, a lot of these behaviors that we're seeing are ultimately just responses to trauma that haven't been healed, that are being acted out in a way that's fucking over the entire world.
Well, and it starts really little, right? That it starts when you're really young. So, you know, as parents, it's really pretty common to say something to your kid of like, do this thing because I told you so, but that is beginning the power over structure at an early age. So as children coming up, it's like, I'm supposed to do this thing because a higher person told me so. And then look how that plays out in politics. Look how that plays out, you know, ongoing. And Ariel, to your point too, it's like we have this almost like these archetypes, right? And so we think that prostitution is an archetype, but at some point, if you feel afraid, or if you have a trauma, or if someone is threatening your life or your child's life, you might sell yourself, your body, your, you know, your ideals, your values, to know that you can save somebody else. And so it's like, what is the trade-off? And sometimes you feel like it's the trade-off for your safety and security.
And I think a lot of people too who are, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people who are involved in these potentially corrupt systems are not thinking that deeply about it. I mean, I think a lot of people are just trying to put food on the table,
Right.
And pay rent. And, and, you know, they might not be thinking too deeply about what it is that they're involved in, or they might feel like they don't have a choice because they're just doing what they need to survive. Right. And they might be contributing to profoundly unjust and evil system, but for them, they're just trying to live their lives.
I think that's most people. And the responsibility, unfortunately, to create better systems is in the hands of the people making the systems that are benefiting from it. And so it's like, and I don't know, I mean, like, we've talked about this, like, in terms of like, you work hard as a person and you finally have a little bit. And look, I feel like, when you're poor, you think people should share, and you also share. I think like the poorest people share the most. Mm-hmm. Whereas like when you just have a little bit, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I've earned my little bit and I don't want to share mine anymore. And anyone that wants to take it from me, they don't deserve it and they need to work hard for it too. And it's this scarcity mentality.
I think it's that of like, they need to work hard for it too.
We talked about that when the kids, as I grew up, we weren't rich, we're not rich. As I matured, when my wife and I were just starting out, we had nothing. We were willing to share that nothing with everybody. Yeah. And we were very kind about it. But then as we both worked, and me in particular, I guess I could say is a shortcoming, I guess. When I worked and started to provide for my family, I was less inclined to share the fruits of my labors with other people. I mean, we make donations, we make contributions, and we try to live right and do right by the planet and everything else within certain parameters, but I became reluctant to share the fruits of my hard labor with other people. When I had something, I wasn't willing to share it as much as when I had nothing. And I think a lot of people feel that way to a certain extent. Some don't. Some are much more altruistic than I was.
But to mitigate
it was tough to do.
To mitigate a little bit of what you said, though, Kurt, you also have to look at it from the standpoint of you spent many, many, many years sharing what you had, what little you did have. So when you got to the point to where you could provide more for your family, then that's when you started feeling that way. But it wasn't like you never did it before.
That's true.
At least, yeah. So
once
I feel the same way when we were growing up. My family, we fed all the kids in the neighborhood all the time. They spent almost all their time at our house. And when my kids were growing up, it was the same thing. And, when you get older, you start thinking, okay, I want to do more for my kids.
But there's something to be said, just really quickly. I know, Tally, you're going to say something, but there's something to be said about like doing that, but passing it on in a service by with your children. So, I mean, I feel like Rachel's a pretty cool kid. Like, I don't know, but you know what I mean? So it's like, like maybe at some point you stopped feeling like you wanted to share the fruits of your labor, but you really didn't, because you just shifted how you shared it. Now you raised children that are giving, and you know what I mean? Like you taught lessons from that.
But go ahead, Ariel.
This just reminds me of, thank you. Hey, you finally got it.
But I have your initials.
2.5 years in.
I have your initials on the bottom of my screen, REL. Sorry,
it just makes me think about the kind of the difference between Moism and Confucianism. Like a lot of people know about Confucianism now, but it sort of focuses on structuring society through everybody fulfilling their societal and familial roles. So it's very much about creating the ideal society, being a good father or a good mother, a good child, a good brother, a good sister, and sort of creating benefit through that structure, as opposed to Moism, named after this guy Mo, who basically advocated universal love, which was seen as a radically dangerous idea at the time. Because basically, if you're treating all kids the same, if you're loving every child the same way that you do your child, if you love every old person the same way that you do your own parents, and you treat them equally, then it potentially, well, according to the Confucians, causes a complete and total breakdown of society, which leads to chaos and madness. Unfortunately, Moism did not survive very long, but they did become epically amazing scientists and warriors dedicated to universal love, which I thought was pretty cool.
That's very cool.
But it's sort of two ways of viewing how to create the ideal society by where you put your energy, and whether you're doing sort of an egalitarian, more socialist societal structure, or more of a hierarchical democratic one.
Is there any material on that?
Well, Mo wrote the, I mean, Mo wrote his book back in the day. I imagine it's been translated, I think it's been translated into English, but yeah, Mozi is his name, or in English, they'd probably write it Mo2, because they usually write the Z, TZU. But yeah, I can't think of what they would call his book in English. They might just call it Mozi or Motius, because usually they Latinize the endings, but I don't think he's popular enough to have gotten the Latin ending.
Okay.
He was kind of, yeah, he was kind of contemporary of Pythagoras and Confucius and Lao Tzu and all those cats.
I want to comment.
Oh, go ahead, John.
I want to comment on something that Kurt said, that you know, about when you first got married and you shared everything and blah blah blah. But as you got older, you know, as you started accumulating more stuff, you didn't say that you stopped sharing. You said you still made donations. You still, you know, shared some of what you have. You just didn't share
In the same way.
in the same way. But that was the point that I got, is, okay, well, you know, when I didn't have much and I'd share $1 out of, if I had $2, I'd share 1. But now if I have $5, I'm only sharing 2 and I'm keeping 3. The concept to me is still the same. It's just that, you know, hey, I want to enjoy the benefits of my labor, but I'm not going to take away from those people who still need it. That's what I got out of what you were saying.
Well, I think
People
part of
are-
it,
What Dirk said, that we put more energy into providing for our family
Right.
Right. And
instead of, you know, sharing it outside.
people are less likely to share or to share as much, like as they make a little bit, even just, I say this all the time, that like especially politicians will like target, which I don't think you are, but like lower middle class, or like just above the poverty line, basically, as like you're just like us now that you have something, you're just like us, and you don't want to share with people who are in poverty because they're there because they're not working like you are.
We hear that all the time. We hear that all the time.
You're just like us now, and you don't want to pay taxes, and you don't want to share with poor people.
Among our friend group, we hear that a lot. The people that say, I don't want to contribute to that because I don't want those poor people. I don't want those, let me rephrase. I don't want those people getting what they haven't worked for. With regard to health benefits, food stamps, access, health, anything you want to say, I don't want my hard-earned tax dollars helping these people.
Right,
And
because if I suffered, everybody else should suffer too.
my wife and I just think, I mean,
But here's the
you know,
thing.
that's
We're
appalling. It's really appalling.
But when we're suffering, the whole time you're going through it and you're suffering, you're sitting there thinking like, why is it so hard? Why does it have to be so hard? It's such a struggle. And if it was so hard for me, like for us, right, then it would beg the question of like, why is it so hard? Why does it have to be so hard? Because when things were simpler, and I'm talking like caveman, right? Like super simple, like we got to choose our hard, right? Like the thing that was hard was probably going out and like into the wild, trying to maybe get like some food. And that was the hard thing. And like now our bodies are trying to have that same sense of stress, but we're getting it from things that should not be so hard. It should not be a struggle to get food when there should be food accessible to everybody, right? And so it's kind of like this idea of it doesn't need to be hard for us. Instead of looking down at the people and being like, you should have the same hardness that I had to work through, we should be looking upward and being like, why are we making these systems so hard? It should be smooth and seamless and easy for everybody.
and I think that I mean, we had a whole show, we talked about the welfare system and like the big propaganda that happened when we were children to convince poor people that other poor people were moochers, when in fact, most poor people are working their asses off for almost nothing, and they can't even support themselves on that. And the idea that, you know, middle class, upper middle class people have, like, oh, all those poor people are just moochers and we shouldn't pay taxes and want to share with them, is actually based on a total fallacy and is not true about the amount of hours that poor people work to put food on the table for their families.
Exactly.
Like, we should all be like giving them a hand, because honestly, like, I mean, I'm poor too, giving them a hand, giving us a hand. Like, but like, yeah, we work our asses off for not very much. And especially like, you know, I mean, I don't have kids, and because my parents did, I mean, they were generous my whole life, like, you know, in terms of like sharing with our family, feeding our friends who came over, taking our friends on vacation when we could go away. And like, I feel like as an adult, I try to give back to my community as much as I can. And I've worked in service my whole life because I believe that that's the highest thing we can do as people, is to try to help each other in every way we can. And I got that from my parents' generosity to me, and that I saw modeled by them. And yeah, I just think that we can't, you know, like, yeah, I mean, sorry, it's a lot. Yeah, I don't even think that, yeah, we should not be looking at it the way that it is. And we're just, you know, the people are repeating the rhetoric of these systems of control that are meant to keep people poor and meant to convince other poor people not to help each other, meant to keep that division.
I think
Well,
that when
and
you have,
thinking of-
I think that when you've climbed a rung or two up the ladder, a couple things happen. I think one, there's the thought that sharing what you have beyond a certain point with other people will basically take you back to the ground level, and you'll have to start that climb all over again.
That's a fear, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the fear, as opposed to if you're already on the ground and you've got a couple scraps, like you've not even started up the ladder really.
Yeah.
I think that the other thing is if you're one rung up the ladder and somebody comes along and proposes a bunch of policies that will lift most everybody else up to that first rung, then you have frequently a sense of injustice trumping compassion.
Mhm.
As far as, you know, I've worked this hard to get this far. It's not fair for these other people just to be lifted up to the same level and get it for free.
What
right,
would,
so
what
you
would
guys
happen? Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead with your question and come back to me.
What would happen to depression, crime, homelessness if human beings were provided with the basic necessities? I mean, a lot of crime and depression and mental health issues come from the stress of just trying to fucking survive in today's society. And if you took that stress away and that energy was directed, or could be directed in a more positive area. I mean, I supposedly retired 8 or 9 years ago, and I'm working harder now than I did then. And I'm not making any money doing this. I mean, I'm able to keep the doors open and pay the bills, but it's something that I enjoy doing, and I'm not getting a lot of money for it, but I'm still doing it because that's, I think, human nature. If I had all my bills paid and everything, I'd probably be doing more. I wouldn't be charging money to do the stuff that I'm doing. So I just don't think, you know, I just don't think that most people are smart enough to figure that out, or the ones that do aren't in a position to do something about it.
Yeah.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
All right. Thank you, John. Thanks for doing your thing. Ariel, I think since we've discussed this like so much, and I don't want to lose your whole idea. Should we get to the apocalypsing?
Sure, unless we
Okay.
want to throw in our weekly random news stories, because I had one interesting, but we can jump into the apocalypse.
Oh, you want to? All right, you want to save that for the end?
Can I throw in one thing about the last subject?
Yeah,
Sure.
go for it.
I find it amazing how brainwashed we've become, and how the lack of education and critical thinking has put it in this position for all the stuff that we talked about before that. Because if all you have to do as a thinking person is to look at how much the minimum wage has gone up and how much inflation has gone up and how much CEO pay has gone up. And once you see those things, just those three things, you can say, you know what? There's something intrinsically wrong with this system.
It's bullshit.
Yeah, it's not just poor people and us giving them stuff, whatever. They're in a position where somebody has to literally work 2 jobs at minimum wage just to be able to feed their family and pay rent.
You know, 2 or
No, they
5.
can't do both.
Right.
They can't do both on 2 minimum wage jobs.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
impossible.
I find that amazing. If the average person just looked at that, you would not have that feeling of us versus them, or it's these poor people aren't working. That's bullshit.
True that.
It is bad.
All right, Ariel,
Okay, Ariel.
what's your favorite or top 3 apocalypses?
All right. So I kind of thought that I'd be talking today just all about global warming. And then as I thought about it, that actually came to be number 3, despite all of the positive reinforcement cycles that we have from the 6.4 trillion tons of methane in the sea floor that might at some point melt and evaporate and be 20 times more powerful than CO2.
Did our dad send you a crazy thing about methane?
I forgot to read that, but I should have. It was
I
relevant.
don't know why he sent it to me. He knows I can't read that.
But yeah, we've sea ice, basically just making water absorb more light. We've got all these positive reinforcement cycles that are going to screw things up pretty bad. But I think that the human race will hobble through, potentially in a greatly reduced sense. Our quality of life is probably going to go way down. The majority of humans may die. But I think that our species is resilient enough that some will survive, even if it's in, underground biodome bunkers made for just the ultra wealthy. I think the most likely.
And the Mormons.
What's that?
And the Mormons.
They're already set up. They already have their bunkers set up.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, so it'll just be the Mormons left. I think that the most likely cause will probably be genetic engineering, whether through some gene tweaking that has unanticipated consequences, or some organism that has just unexpected catastrophic effects on the biosphere faster than we can possibly compensate, or potentially a genetically engineered virus that gets out. I think if we make it through that and actually start to colonize the universe, then it's going to be a million different things. Because I think time will ultimately do us in, but I think humans on different planets will ultimately meet with different fates or transform themselves into things that are no longer recognizable as human. You do have the Fermi paradox, which asks the question as far of why we aren't seeing aliens everywhere or giant alien structures, and whether life is really just this rare, if our cosmic bubble is the cosmic bubble, or if the universe really is a very scary place, and as soon as we step out and make a peep, we'll be destroyed. So that's a possibility, but I think we would see some evidence of the universe being that savage a place that we haven't yet. So I think that maybe the speed of light is actually a boundary, and maybe life really is just quite rare. But I think there's not really enough info to postulate too much on that. So yeah, I'm thinking genetic engineering followed by time and a billion little things, or a billion big things, followed very, very closely by global warming. But I could be very wrong about the global warming, and it could definitely wipe us out. So that's
I feel like there's the potential nuclear disaster, nuclear war, nuclear disaster, which hopefully we are not dumb enough to do to ourselves, but we could do that, which I guess that could just be coupled into something that would accelerate global warming. But something I read about that I thought was cool was self-replicating nanotechnology. Did you read anything about that?
That is definitely up there.
You know, like all these little nanobots are like microscopic little things that can act and do a bunch of things, and we program them and they can replicate themselves. And so, and we're making them to do stuff, and they have a great potential for fixing things, but they also have a great potential, like AI, sort of like it could fix things, but as soon as it realizes that we're a big part of the problem, it could turn on us.
Well,
Well,
and even if
in
they
that-
don't, I mean, going back to the dark forest thing, if a species wanted to wipe out humanity, that would definitely be the way to do it. And you don't need anything. All you need is something with the instructions to take whatever pieces, to take apart whatever it can and make more of itself. And yeah.
In the Nick Bostrom video that Rachel didn't watch but sent to us all, he really briefly touched on the idea that basically, like, we're all scared of nuclear weapons, but in order to create nuclear weapons, you have to have all of the materials that you need to have like a huge facility to create nuclear weapons and so on. But what about something on that scale that doesn't require all of that space and all of those materials? Like, we'll find something, we'll create something that doesn't require all of that shit. And
I mean, if I were,
and then what? Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, if I were a dictator, I would just be. If I were Kim Jong-un, I would just be putting all of my resources into creating and magnetically containing antimatter to then hold the world hostage. As an example, something that could be vastly more devastating than nuclear weapons.
Right. Well, so right, it's like somebody's. Or we all
don't tell him I said that.
So we find
Too late, he's listening.
So we get somewhere to the point where we figure out like something as catastrophic or close or more that just doesn't require all of what we need for nuclear weapons. And then somebody who's just a dick decides to go for it.
Or in trying to figure out what it is, we make a mistake and blow shit up in the invention process.
Well, how many of our modern conveniences and have been a result of some type of accident? You know, that you were looking for this and you found this or whatever. But
I
Penicillin.
I know the guy who invented the Mr. Clean Magic Eraser, and he was trying to make insulation for the space shuttle.
Yeah. So I want to respond to Ariel's comment about alien life forms and you know, us not being aware of whether or not we've contacted them or they've contacted us or whether they exist. And I think the reason for that is the prime directive, is that they are not, sorry, I couldn't resist going there. But I believe.
If you don't know what the prime directive is, John, tell us.
Okay, the prime directive basically says that any race cannot interfere with an inferior race until they reach a certain point in their evolution. You know, so it's a Star Trek thing, you know. So
It makes sense.
Until they've broken the speed of light, specifically.
Right.
Until they become a threat to the Federation of Planets, then you blow them up.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Klingons when Rachel introduced Claire as Claire, daughter of Dirk.
Claire, daughter of Dirk.
I'm like, should I be offended that you thought of Klingons when you met me? I don't know.
That's quite a compliment.
And the other thing is that I really have a lot of faith in the human race. That
Boy, I don't.
But dude, you're old enough to go back to. I mean, I was born right after the Second World War, so I remember as a kid having air raids. You know, that when the siren goes off, you turn off all your lights and you pull down the shades so that no light escapes because if any planes are coming over, blah, blah, blah. Then we had the 60s where we did the drop and cover. You covered your head under your desk because in case of a nuclear explosion. And then we had the October shit where we were all going to die because of the Cuban Missile Crisis. So we have been on the brink of a lot of shit. But I think as any living organism, we adapt, we improvise, and we overcome.
Another Clint Eastwood movie reference.
Yeah, you're right. Well, what can I say? Hoorah! We may not survive in the current form that we are now, but there will be something. We may evolve into some other, kind of creature. And the time span that we've been on this earth is infinitesimal on a universal scale. I mean, we're just that fast, and that's all the time that we've been here.
Well, speaking of air raids, Layla is still got the door closed to her bomb shelter, but they are eating and she's got plenty of vodka.
Wait a minute. So you said she has a boyfriend?
Yes.
What do we know about this guy? I mean, does he have
great.
a job? Does he come
best.
from a good family?
Yes, he's the best. And actually, it's the funniest story how they met. They were both still in the army, and Layla had a pretty high clearance,
security
clearance, and it's
that blows my mind. Having you for a mom, and she's got a real high security clearance.
and they had control of my Facebook while she was in the army. That was funny.
What?
Yeah.
So they saw all that shit that I posted on your Facebook page?
And they took some things down. I'm not going to lie. But
No.
Anyway, his clearance, they were both geniuses. So anyway, they were both informed not to accept friend requests and if anything seemed shady, whatever. And I probably shouldn't be saying any of this, but anyway, he thought that they met online and Layla's Hebrew wasn't that good yet. So he thought that she was a terrorist. And instead of not talking to her, blocking her and all that, he thought it was great. He just wanted to see how far he could take this and what was going to happen. And 2 years later,
Awesome.
they are in love and they live together and they're in a bomb shelter.
We need to make a movie of that. That would make a great movie.
Know.
Right?
He seems like a good one. I generally approve from what I've seen.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's good they have company.
Good.
And in response to what my sister was saying, though, about us figuring out some catastrophic weapon that will destroy all life on the planet, I think that part of whether that will extinct the human race depends on whether or not we've colonized yet. Because if we've colonized and someone, sets off whatever and destroys all life on the planet, then we'll still have humanity going elsewhere.
Well,
that
depends on how much they've advanced in their colonization.
Going back to what you were saying, Ariel.
But one could assume that if we've developed the technology sufficient to colonize one planet, that we would probably expand out from there and continue to do so, having already developed technologies.
Well, going back to what you were saying earlier, Ariel, it depends on what your definition of evolution is, because if you believe in evolution and it's natural, the end result, then what you define as human will always be changing anyway.
Yeah.
As we adapt and whatever. The other thing I wanted to make a point on is that as far as nuclear weapons and stuff like that, I don't think it's going to be a scenario where somebody sets off a nuke and then all the other countries do. I don't think humans are that stupid. I mean,
Yeah, they are.
No. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Kurt, but I just don't believe that if say Israel sets off a nuke and Iran, they go at it, that we're all going to nuke everybody else because of what they did. I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening. And when you look at it, when you really look at how vast the United States is and how vast Russia is and how vast China is, you're not.
Somebody's going to survive.
Yeah, there's going to be plenty of smart people that still survive, because what's really going to get hit is probably places like New York and LA and DC, you know, those pockets of politicians and leaders and stuff like that. But the average person is, I mean.
The Mormons are going to survive because they do have bunkers already.
Yeah.
Has anyone made a movie yet about the international people on the International Space Station, basically post-nuclear apocalypse on Earth?
Oh, a couple of them.
That would be a weird, that would be a scary state to be in, seeing the bombs going down below and
I think
still being up there.
it's a series called like the 1,000 or something, the 100 or the 1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be crappy. They wouldn't be able to get back.
There was also a comedy series, The Last Man on Earth. And
yeah.
there were a couple of people that were stuck on the space station when everybody on Earth died anyway. So yeah, that's a lot of people.
And I was just going to say to Claire, I think it's kind of amusing that the Mormons all have bomb shelters because nobody wants to bomb Utah anyway.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what's the point? You know?
Nobody needs to bomb Utah.
Yeah,
Are there missile silos in Utah?
Yeah.
probably.
So some people might.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the Mormons are in Vegas too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when the apocalypse hits,
Let's do the
Everyone-
I'm
Osmonds.
staying
Leave
here in
everybody else
Vegas because everybody's going to be heading to Montana and Wyoming and to get out of the city. So I'm going to have this whole damn city to myself. So I'm
And you're
staying
gonna-
here.
We'll be
And
here
you're
too.
going to be drinking all the water that's being polluted by those nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
See, now I'm glad you brought that up, Kurt, because that was my second part of that whole thing, which is I don't think it's going to be nuclear disaster. What I do suspect is that if something catastrophic is going to happen to this planet, it's going to be because of the greed, the corporate greed, and the little things that keep accumulating over time, polluting the water, polluting the air. These things keep adding up. And I really believe, like Ariel, I read several books about that when they were talking about the methane, and people don't understand that. They don't understand that science behind that. But when that gets out, that right there can probably wipe out all of humanity.
As soon as the sea temperature rises beyond that threshold and all of those methane clarates or clathrates melt, because you've basically got methane coming up off the sea floor that gets sequestered in tiny little like ice crystals. And as soon as those melt, all that 6.4 trillion tons of methane gets released.
Well, it's the same
We're
with-
apparently having
Yeah.
some meeting, like, luckily I checked and it's not my neighborhood, but it's pretty close by. Like the EPA or whatever is having a meeting. Yeah. You don't have to go. You can watch online. But apparently there's something in the air that is that can cause cancer. And
Oh, geez.
it's like the next town over from me. So
Oh.
yeah.
Like
I
the
can
air
totally go
stays
stay
on that
right
side
over
of
that
the
town.
city line. you know?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah.
But they're just trying to figure out what to do about that Lauren Boebert. That's all.
Right.
What's really sad about what you just said, Tally, though, is that I honestly, Rachel, I honestly believe there are people that believe that because they're so stupid as far as the lack of science and critical thinking. They're thinking, "Oh, I don't live in that town. That stuff's
you
not going
have-
to come over here.
and
because
who-
of the
and who
city
has
limits.
hope?
It's going to stop right there."
And who has hope for humanity? I mean, I
That
have to
would
go.
be- that would
I
be
have
me.
to go along to a certain degree what Dirk's saying and what Ariel's saying, but I don't think it's going to be technology. I think we're going to do ourselves in the old-fashioned way. I believe, like Dirk said, all the greed, we are going to suck the life out of this planet. And when that occurs, there are going to be haves and have-nots. And the haves are going to have to destroy the have-nots, and they'll probably use nuclear weapons to do it.
Eat
Or
the
just,
rich.
or just generational poverty
Exactly.
and bad food and cancer.
The haves are going to destroy the have-nots because there's so many of them, and there will only be a finite amount of resources. And the have-nots will want those resources, and the haves will have to resort to nuclear weapons to deny that.
I mean, you're talking about nuclear weapons, but let me just say that like famine and starvation are killing tons of people in the world right now. In East Africa, it's like
It's
so many
it's
people.
already happening
And
in a lot of places.
Like you don't have to bomb everybody. You just make it so that they can't buy food.
Well, that's the
You know,
problem. They're
it's
not
like-
going to be able to get food. So they're going to have to attack the people that do have food. And the people that have food are going to have to defend themselves by killing the people who want food. And in the end result of that, they'll just ruin pretty much everything. And I'm a firm believer that, bugs, that's all that's going to be left. Bugs.
I think that there's something that we haven't actually thought about, I guess, as far as this is concerned, and that is, what is your definition of destroying humanity? Because if you take away all hope and you just leave nothing but depression and trauma, whoever's left, you've basically done the job without killing everybody out there, and that's a really distinct possibility of happening.
I'm
I
a
think it does
pessimist,
beg,
and,
I think it does beg the question of, how do we define humanity? And,
Right.
is it that the current spirit that we have, or, like once we upload into computers, are we still humanity?
Well, we're already in a simulation, but I won't go there.
Right. So,
potentially
humanity has been extinct for billions of years, and now or never existed at all. Who knows?
I am a pessimist, and I lump hope in with thoughts and prayers as the end all be all for our country. This shit's not going to work. Is the people that are the cutthroat people that are going to cutthroat, who are going to kill everybody else to survive, or the hopeful people thinking that won't happen?
Okay,
I tend to think the people with the means are going to destroy the people without, so that they can have theirs. That's what greed is. That's what our country's about, and that's what we're doing to the planet. We're sucking the life out of it because these people want to make money, and they don't give a rat's ass what happens to any of us.
Right.
They don't care.
So what happens then, Kurt? Once
They will eventually run out of resources on this planet, and they'll all die.
I mean, if they kill, I mean,
I
if-
don't think there's much hope for humanity personally. I mean, that's my take on hope.
So you don't think that they'll go elsewhere for resources before this planet runs out of resources?
I don't think they'll develop the technology fast enough, because what's happening now is happening at such an accelerated rate beyond their comprehension already. We are at 2050 right now. They weren't planning on any of this crap that's happening today, climate-wise, until 2050. It's already happening.
I'm
And
curious.
you're saying about the methane in the ocean, there's how many metric tons of methane in the permafrost? And when that warms up, that's all going to come out too.
Well, I
And
think
it's gonna be,
in 2008, they found millions of tons being released in the Siberian Arctic, and this is already 14 years ago. At that point, they measured concentrations reaching 100 times above normal. And that's, but that's just one of numerous positive reinforcement cycles in global warming, that once it gets going, it's not rebalancing itself.
That's what Dirk said. It's going to be a million little things. It's going to be a lot of little things, and it's going to end up destroying. We're going to end up destroying ourselves. That's my opinion, not my hope, but my opinion, that we're going to do it to ourselves. And it's not going to be,
Just because I have hope doesn't mean I won't shoot back.
well, I mean, and they're like, this is a whole other
yeah.
perspective, maybe another talk, but what if this is a simulation, or further, most of what exists in the universe is non-physical substance.
Energy. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, what if this like blip of stuff, of matter that we're made of, is just part of like a cycle of evolution where we become energy beings, where we no longer need our bodies, where hopefully we'll get to figure out how to exist in our energy form before we destroy our ability to have physical bodies. Like maybe we don't have to go somewhere in a spaceship to break the speed of light. Maybe that's something that we do with our consciousness in an energy form when we learn how to transcend the need for a physical body.
I think we're gonna run out of time. Personally.
No, but people have already done that now. The energy body. So, you know, the Tibetan Buddhists, and John said he was reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Like there are cultures that have focused on spirit and have learned to transcend, that recognize the physical body as only one form of being.
We used to use the Tibetan Book of the Dead as a guidebook when we dropped acid. I'm absolutely serious about that. I'm absolutely serious about that. And pardon me?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that was our intent at the time, was to raise our consciousness, and that's why we were, you know, and then it just got turned into, let's go get high. But the original group that I hung around with, that's what we were there for, and that's what we were doing, was figuring out, okay, where's the next step? What, you know, what's after this? Where do we go from here? So,
Well, it made you an altruist.
yeah.
So do you
And
think
I'm still waiting for those damn flashbacks, you know?
You know what's really fascinating about that, when you were talking about aliens and stuff, first of all, I don't think that in the scheme of things, as vast as the universe is, that we are the only intelligent beings in the universe. I truly don't believe that.
I agree.
so?
Yeah.
But secondly, when you look at, just look at it from this aspect. When you look back on history and you see the amazing things like what the Mayans did, the Egyptians did, building the pyramids, building all these vast structures, the science that was behind it, when the sun reached a certain point, it would shine the sun through and make whatever, you know, when you look at all that stuff, either we've lost a lot of great knowledge, or that knowledge came from somewhere else and we lost access to that. So that leads you to believe a number of things. Either we're capable of doing that again, or those people will come back to visit, or however you want to look at it, whether you believe in aliens or believe in the evolution of humanity. Something caused that to happen and then it left. And now we're trying to regain that with science and the things that we're doing now. So I just find that whole aspect very fascinating, which way you lean.
So do you think that
Whatever-
aliens have already been coded into the simulation, or do you think that's yet to come? By which I mean, do you believe in all that ancient aliens?
Well, are we all in the same simulation?
Yes.
Yes, you sure about that?
Yes.
Okay.
So I want to go back
I
to
think that-
Ariel's statement about us looking at, like, you know, maybe the speed of light being the barrier, because I think it's very interesting that we assume that, like, we, not, you know, collectively assume that we are the life, like the most intelligent, or like, you know, we can't be the only intelligent life form out there. But what if we are the least intelligent life form out there, and therefore we can't see the other ones? Because let's get curious about, like, this idea of what if evolution of humanity is actually this enlightenment that a lot of people are working towards, right? They're working towards this enlightenment, but what if that is evolution? What if evolving to be beyond the light, you know, the speed of light, is us, like Rachel was saying, talking about, you know, living in an energy form, and that we are the dumb ones in the universe, galaxy, you know, whatever, and us learning how to figure out how to get along, how to meet all of our needs, to going to like chakras and energy work and all this stuff to be able to connect with our higher self, is our evolution to be able to kick it with the aliens. So are they in the simulation? I think that they're beyond the simulation, because they're looking at us being like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, what the matter with you?
Is this their
that's a very-
simulation?
Probably.
that-
They're probably playing the game laughing at us.
I think
because-
that actually would provide a really good explanation for why we're not seeing any alien megastructures, because we don't have enough data to really predict the standard societal evolution. But given the fact that, you know, we do have pyramids and Chichen Itza, you know, all these amazing marvels from thousands of years ago, a lot of people assume, we would see giant structures in space.
No, it's when
there's
we
been
start
plenty of
doing
aliens
something.
that have had a chance to come about and evolve way beyond the level that we're at. But yeah, if the standard course of an evolution for any species that doesn't just extinct itself is to, become one with your planet and transcend the physical form and then fly around the universe as an energy being, then yeah, they wouldn't need Dyson spheres and giant spaceships and whatnot. So I like that thinking, because it's definitely a lot rosier than the dark forest.
That would be cool, yeah.
And I find it fascinating too, because you think about aliens looking at us, they probably, I don't know if they necessarily think we're stupid, but I bet you they'd be thinking, these are the most intelligent, stupid creatures ever. Because you think about it, we're sitting here, we're trying to figure out how to reach the stars and go to other planets and send out the Hubble telescope and all these different things in the galaxy, but we haven't hardly even explored the ocean floor.
Our own.
Or our
So,
mind,
we're
our own
talking
mind.
about all these
Yeah.
structures that aliens might have created or ancient civilizations. There's stuff on the ocean floor that we haven't even seen. We don't know what's there.
We don't know what's
Well,
on
we're not their only simulation. Like there have got to be a ton of simulations.
I think we
Like
all
the
have our
odds
own
that we could
simulation.
possibly, the odds that we could possibly be the only simulation, like it's basically impossible.
So
I
do you think
there are
humanity will
benevolent
go extinct
beings.
when
Parallel
the-
universes.
Go ahead, Ariel, sorry.
Yeah.
Do you think that do you think humanity will go extinct when the simulation gets unplugged? Or do you think that
If
within
it gets
simulation-
unplugged, then sure. Like I mean, or we might just get kicked back to the beginning. Or
I mean,
like
maybe
hopefully
the
there have been
simulation
some
is making
save
it-
points. I don't know.
I mean,
Here's
if
the
there's a
problem with the
simulation.
simulation thing, though.
So how will we go extinct in the simulation, do you think?
Well, maybe the point of the simulation is to always make it seem like there's like disasters just around the corner. Like in this physical world, something always is going to happen. There's fear, there's scarcity. And there's also this love and hope and like the more uplifting emotions that we can feel. And so it's like, and you can tap into fear and love in a very non-physical way, but just within your own experience, like without anything out there telling you. And so it's like, maybe it's trying to show us how to overcome fear, how to overcome hatred, how to overcome anger, how to overcome our debilitating suffering in order to learn how to evolve into a being that isn't plagued by
get
suffering.
over the addiction to suffering and struggle, and like be able to accept and be. And I feel like if we were circling back to how to look at this apocalypse and the trauma and everything, I mean, we're getting thrown shit and chaos and conflict all the time, but what if that is what the simulation is about? The simulation is about being able to see all of this is going to be constant and coming. We have no control over who's going to nuke who, and if they're going to make nanobots, we have no control over that. But it's like, do I need to live in suffering within my experience while I'm here? And like, if that is the enlightened evolution, is to be able to, the simulation is like those people who are able to evolve out of that and live in this planet with all the chaos without being in suffering.
Right. Another interesting point from the video that nobody watched.
We got to we'll put it in the comments. So you can go back to the video.
Well, Nick Bostrom talks about AI a lot. And one of the things that he was like, one way that we could end up wiping ourselves out with AI was so by not programming AI to keep in mind what we actually want and what we need when say we ask our AI to solve some sort of a math problem, and the AI realizes that actually like the best way to do this would be to turn the world into a computer, and in order to do that they would need to get rid of us.
And the answer is 42.
Yes. But all sorts of things, there are things that it would, at some point, like AI would find it easier to get rid of us to solve some sort of a problem that we've asked it to do, or that it would be easier if we were dead in order to XYZ. And so basically, like, he compares this to like the King Midas story, essentially. Just
All right, we got 5 minutes, guys.
yeah. So anyway, actually watch anything by Nick Bostrom, or
Yeah, let's check it out.
read his book on the simulation theory. He's super interesting. So thank you, Rachel, for sharing some of his work with us.
Well, I think I did read some of what he
It really
wrote
is
on the simulation. So I just didn't
I-
read
Really
the
is
know-
the
details.
ultimate in solipsism, though, because Descartes' whole thing was like, I think, therefore I am, but couldn't be certain of anything else, and then decided that God wouldn't be that mean and that everything's probably real. But I think the simulation
What
theory
God?
even calls into the question of the I think, therefore I am. Like, that simulation theory says just because you think doesn't mean that you are, and except as a part of a simulation.
I don't know. The simulation theory is totally, it's fascinating, and it's terrifying and fun.
All right,
So
last-
what can we do in
last
our last
thoughts?
5 minutes? What can we do
Ariel
in
had-
terms of fixing it, if there's
Well,
anything?
Ariel had something fun to discuss.
Yes, completely unrelated.
Okay, so we'll deal with fixing it next week. Is that the?
Sure.
I mean, unless
Okay.
we can fix every problem of humanity within the next 2 minutes. But
Go ahead.
otherwise, I'll just go into something entirely unrelated. I
Okay,
always
next week
love-
fixing it. This week go.
Okay. I always love news stories that sort of show the relationships that have long been understood in Chinese medicine and are finally being sort of validated by Western science. Particularly this one. So in Chinese medicine, the lungs and the large intestine are paired organs. Every organ has its pair. They're also paired with the skin. In Qigong, they talk about breathing through the skin as well as just through the nose and mouth, which we've known for a long time that reptiles can do. We've now realized that human skin has olfactory receptors, which is a big thing. A while back, they found some turtle that was able to breathe through its anus. And this week,
McConnell.
they just discovered that pigs can breathe through their anuses, and potentially people as well.
I've been breathing through my anus this whole time. What have you guys been doing?
So
Mine only breathes out,
just
unfortunately.
the whole,
I'm amazed
that
at the
whole,
ones that can talk through their anus.
but just the whole lung, large intestine connection, which to many Westerners might seem a little weird or nonsensical. The fact that you can breathe through both and that you have olfactory receptors in your skin, when the three have always been connected for thousands of years in Chinese medicine, I found pretty cool.
Cool.
That's my thing.
That is pretty
That's your
cool.
story and you're sticking to it.
Using science to prove what we already knew thousands of years later. Yay!
But then the Americans will
What we
actually
had
listen
all
to it.
hoped.
I think with spirituality, I mean, there's a lot. I was just watching this amazing physicist guy talking about these experiments they were doing where human intention influences things that shouldn't be able to be influenced, usually in game theory. And it's like, there's a lot that we don't know about what we're capable of in a non-physical way that we're just beginning to explore and research. And I think there's so much. Claire, you got to come on and like talk about it more, because I can tell you're into it. But there's a lot we don't know. And I feel like I have hope in that department, because the stuff we do know is pretty shitty.
Can I leave us with a question?
Yes, absolutely.
What if the apocalypse or the thought or the idea of the end of the species was the gift instead of the fear?
I love it.
I like it. I like it a lot. As my final word, I want to
We're going to
wish
sing
this
happy
wonderful
birthday.
lady a happy
All right.
birthday.
Happy
My mama,
birthday.
today's her birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday,
Happy birthday,
Rachel's mom.
Rachel's mom. Happy
Happy
birthday
birthday
to
to
you.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Dee.
Thank you
Hey.
all.
WTF family edition.
Yeah.
You're
Right?
right.
I kind of love it. I love it.
It's all good. It's,
I mean, I've had my
it's,
sister here the
not
whole
being
time.
here. It's good to be here.
Yeah,
I
it's
do
kind
have
of
one
always
thing I
a
gotta say,
family
though.
show.
Please
What's
say.
up, Dirk?
The one thing I have to say is that I don't really believe in the simulation theory, but there's two factors about that. Number one, if this is a simulation, who's behind the simulation? Because
We are.
because that takes us back to the whole thing. And secondly, even if this is a simulation and we're part of that simulation, that still makes us something.
Yeah, to me, it's just a bad acid trip.
Well,
No,
I
I
didn't
mean,
say that we're.
like,
I
we're the
didn't say that we are not
simulation.
anything.
If we're the simulation, then basically we are that energy being.
Yep.
Oh, I didn't
So
say
that's
that we
something else to
weren't
think about.
anything.
I mean, the simulation doesn't imply that we're not anything. It just implies
Right.
that it's not what it seems like it is to us.
And this is our resident believer in reincarnation.
Ah,
Me too.
Right,
I
Ron?
believe it too.
Or
I
something.
like it.
Or something of the sort.
I'm more of an
Right on.
ashes
I
dust to
agree
dust
with
guy.
you. I was just talking about that with somebody else the other day. I believe in it too.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, folks. That's
Well,
it.
next week, we're going to expand on a lot of this other cool stuff.
Yeah.
Been an awesome
Everybody
show.
do Research, come prepared.